The Data Hot Seat. Hello, data friends. Welcome back to the Data Hot Seat, where we keep working our way through the biggest announcements from the Databricks Data and AI Summit, one topic at a time. I'm your host, Paul McComish from Advancing Analytics, where the coffee is still strong and the opinions, as always, are stronger. Today, we're talking about two things that go hand in hand, Genie One and Genie Ontology. Genie One is the next evolution of the Databricks AI BI assistant, now positioned as a data-smart AI co-worker that shows up in Slack, Teams, your phone, wherever you need it. But the really interesting part, for me at least, is what's underneath it, which is Genie Ontology. This is the context layer that continuously learns how your business actually works, what your data really means, and it's claiming some genuinely impressive accuracy numbers on real business questions. If you've ever had a business user ask Genie a question and get a confidently wrong answer back, this is the episode for you. I'm speaking to Ash Warren from Advancing Analytics to deep dive into the detail. So let's get into it. So welcome to the Data Hot Seat to Ash. So for those of you who don't know who Ash is, who are you? What do you do?
Hi, I'm Ash. I'm one of our senior analytics consultants. So I help our clients with Databricks AI BI, with Genie, analytics engineering, Power BI, anything analytics based, really. I'm also a community speaker and community event organizer as well. So pretty active getting out there to trying to talk about things like Genie.
I feel like I'm speaking to a celebrity then.
Oh, no, not at all. No stretch of the imagination. That's a bit of a push.
Well, we are today going to talk about Genie One and also Genie Ontology. So we will start this quite simple. What is the difference between Genie One and what came before it? And what does Genie Ontology do underneath all of that?
Yeah, good question. So Genie One it's kind of gone through a couple of rebrandings recently. So it started life as Databricks One, and then it got rebranded to Databricks Genie, and now it's finally Genie One again. But effectively, it's the talk to your data sort of product from Databricks, and the idea of it is that someone when they first log into Databricks, if they've got a question, they just ask Genie One straight away. So without having to go and search out their table and write some SQL query or find the right dashboard or whatever it is, they just ask a question, pretty standard like a ChatGPT type thing, but it's using your data, your context. It's slightly different from Genie Spaces, which have also been done up recently in Deus when became the Genie agents. That's kind of like specific to just one sort of context. So you sort of narrow that down for Genie agents or Genie Spaces, but Genie One has kind of got access to pretty much everything that you've got access to in Databricks to answer your question. And because of that, the Genie Ontology is there to try and help it make sure that it's finding the right things. So if you went in and asked, how much money did we make last month? If you're the finance director, for example, you might be talking about EBITDA, like how much profit did you make last month after tax? If you were the sales director, you might be just saying, well, how much should we sell? What's our revenue? Kind of thing. And that idea of what does a person mean has been the biggest challenge with tools like Genie. Genie Ontology is there to try and help answer and solve that problem. So it's going to sort of scan all of your data before, like in the background, work out what all of everything means, trying to get an idea of like the types of people and types of questions that might be asked. And then when you ask the question at runtime, it just goes and looks at the outputs of Genie Ontology and sort of uses that to try and work out, right, this person means this thing. That means I need to go and have a look at this table or look at this dashboard to get the answer. Run the query, execute it, package it up, send it back, and sort of then hopefully that gives your answer and gives your user what they're expecting.
Let's hope so.
Yes. Yeah. I think one of the challenges we've sort of seen certainly before Genie Ontology with the sort of early iterations of like Genie One or when it was Databricks One was that sometimes it would just pick something and it would write a query. And it wasn't quite like Microsoft Copilot levels of making up an answer and telling you it was perfect and right. It was still pretty good, but it didn't always know. For example, the sales director logging in just wants to know what his revenue is. And he's not saying revenue. He's just saying, what's my sales or how much did we make or whatever, sort of casual language. Because I guess one of the challenges we've seen is that when a person wants to ask a question to something like this, they want to do it quickly, right? And they don't want to necessarily load all of the knowledge that they have out of their brain into that prompt. And so Genie Ontology is there to try and effectively do that for you so that you, without you noticing, so it can sort of add that context layer that probably is going to be missing from an end user's prompt back in, so that the agent that's answering the question has got that idea of what you actually need.
Context is everything, of course. And that was a particular thing. Context, choice, and control, I think, were the three big C's from the conference.
Yes.
But they quoted in the keynote that Genie Ontology could achieve 84.5% first attempt accuracy on governed business questions. It's a big jump on sort of just generally throwing your coding agent at it and hoping for the best. So can you elaborate a little bit more on what's driving that improvement?
Yeah, so the context behind this, so Databricks ran a test, a benchmark. So they created a 28 question suite of questions that it expects a user will come and ask of a tool like Genie One. So I guess executive focused sort of questions that will probably not be super detailed in terms of like the context behind them, because they're probably typing quickly on their phone from the mobile. And they sort of tested it against coding agents. So things like Codex or Claude Code, things that don't necessarily have the context of your data, of your estate, of how things sort of work in your organization. And they found that Genie with Ontology was getting the questions right 84.5% of the time. So 85%, give or take some change. The next best was 52, and then 40, and then 25. But the other interesting thing there was they were also testing the speed as well. So Genie Ontology was, they used that as the baseline of one, where the coding agent that was 52% was twice as slow. The only one that was sort of at a similar speed was down at 40% accuracy. So the idea is that it's not just more accurate, but it's also fast as well. And the main reason for that is what's happening under the hood, from what we understand so far, is that effectively there's a bunch of pre-compute happening. So, and not in a scary way, compute meaning like spending lots and lots on your SQL warehouses, but effectively Databricks going and scanning all of the assets in your Databricks environment and all of the assets in any connected apps that you have. So you can connect things like Teams or Slack or OneDrive or SharePoint into it as well. And it will effectively scan all of those documents and work out all of the domains, all of the sort of the people who are the experts, the bits of data that it can use, the definitions of how you would define a metric, or what you mean if you use the phrase DBU, or so on and so on. And it creates a bunch of nodes on a graph by them. So look, points on a graph with all of that. Each of those is one bit of information. And every time there's a link between things, it draws a line. And so as you zoom out, you get this knowledge graph of everything that you've got and how it relates to each other. And so from that, when you're asking your question, a traditional coding agent, generally it has to go and scan everything in your estate that it thinks is going to be useful to understand how it can answer your question. So I guess the way to think about, or the way I'm trying to think about it, is if I am asked a question and I know the answer is somewhere on a slide deck, like on a slide on a PowerPoint presentation somewhere on my OneDrive, I'm going to probably start going through and opening up OneDrive and looking at every PowerPoint that has got a relatively similar name to the type of question, open that up, look for the slide, maybe I'll find it, maybe I won't, have to move on to the next PowerPoint, so on and so on. And I'm kind of going for this random walk through all of the data in my essay. Whereas if I had beforehand, if I was just able to go, right, there's this one file I can look at that tells me where any bit of information I need to be is, and where I then have to go and effectively a lookup of, right, go and get this information from this slide on this, in this PowerPoint, and grab it. That's kind of what ontology is, right? It's kind of that lookup of, if you're asked a question about this, here are the places that you should go and scan. So you end up just looking at one file or a handful of files rather than having to open up a bunch of things that weren't useful. And so that then means that it's faster, and also it gets to that right answer, which some of the coding agents might run out of tokens or context window before it's able to do that. So faster and more accurate.
Because it would just spend all its time just scanning documents and not really getting anywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's trying to find a needle in a haystack effectively. And it's much easier to do that if you know exactly where the needle is and you can discount half of the room, right? And you can just immediately go and say, right, it's in that corner over there. I'll just go and search that bit of the haystack rather than having to do the whole thing.
What you need now is a metaphorical magnet to help you find it as well.
Well, yes. That would be helpful, definitely, to sort of, but that's kind of the idea of this, right? It's like that. If I was trying to get to the supermarket, like I'd check a map before I go, right, to know how to walk there. I wouldn't just walk in the general direction that I know the supermarket's in, right? I'm actually going to plan my route there, and that's what Ontology is doing. It's doing the planning of how it, or some of the planning beforehand, so that when you actually come to ask the question, you just go.
So you've spoken about this living knowledge graph, I guess is the way to describe it, made up of like tables, queries, your dashboards, your pipelines, your connected apps, your PowerPoint presentations in random places. Maybe even Confluence and Wiki pages can come into this.
Yeah, Salesforce as well.
All
Basically,
sorts of things.
Yeah, all sorts.
So I read in the keynote that it was using, is it OntoRank to weight these things?
Yeah. So this is a technique that Databricks are coining OntoRank, and it's a slightly modified version of things that have come before. So the thing that it most resembles, I guess, is PageRank from the early days of Google. So when Google first came around, the way it sort of knew how to rank how high up your answer should come back on a search was how many links from the other websites there were to that. So effectively, like looking at that graph and weighting it based on how many different times that page was appearing across other websites and hyperlinks and that kind of thing. Google has evolved slightly from there because that's not the best way to do it, because it's quite easy to game it by have a second website with just full of links to yours and you suddenly get an SEO boost.
Surely not.
like that was the problem in the 90s, right? We're past that. But I mean, the idea of OntoRank is that if we're scanning all of the uses of everything in your Databricks estate and all of your connected apps, different people are going to use different things more. So the reports that get used more, or the dashboards or the tables that get used more, like if they've got a definition across that, then that's probably a more relevant source than this random Excel file that somebody created and nobody's used for 3 years, right? Or similarly, there's a bunch of other things that it uses in that ranking. So effectively, how fresh is it? How relevant is the person who created this to the person who's asking a question is another thing that it's potentially going to use as well. But it's a blend of all of these different things around effectively trying to get the what is that right source to be using to answer this question. So in theory, the OntoRank for that sales director who's asking about how much did we make last month, the things that are OntoRanked as highest for him should be things that are looking at the sales table, things that dashboards that he's got access to, or they and so on. Whereas the finance director might be more looking at things that are related to the finance data. So maybe that links back to the Excel spreadsheets that it's got on OneDrive, or maybe it links to your finance system, etc. And their OntoRanks might not look the same, so they might get a different definition pop up on top because they are in a domain like that effectively defines things slightly different than the other. That's the kind of idea of it. Obviously, we're going to have to wait and see and get hands-on with it to sort of test how accurate that is and how well that works. But freshness, usage, and whether it's sort of relevant to you and whether it's something that people that are in a similar domain to you are asking.
And just to call that out a little bit, I mean, we see in many organizations, many different teams have the same term, but they may have a different definition of it. So it's exactly as you say. It's going to be interesting to see how OntoRank and Genie Ontology works with that to see which definition it uses to surface.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's going to be that's ultimately going to be where this lives or dies, right? In my head, is how good is it at knowing the difference between when I'm asking a question and when somebody else is, right? Between that finance manager and that sales manager, right? They're expecting different answers, even if they haven't explicitly answered that. And that's kind of been a challenge that we've had in analytics for a long time. So before we had an analyst who would effectively have to go and, well, what do you actually want, right? And try and drill in and understand or know from the context of who the person is in the organization, what answer they're wanting. And OntoRank is effectively trying to do this same thing, but automatically and across your entire estate pre-computed. So the example they showed in the keynote had sort of millions of snippets of information in there. So I think it was 4 million odd snippets of information across the ontology that they'd built. So lots of data in there and lots for it to scan in advance.
So it's one of those things we're really excited to try and get a look on, try and get a play with this and see how it works. I'm just going to move back to Genie 1. And we were talking a little bit how it is like rebranded, but it's slightly different as well because again, referring back to the keynote, they're talking about its ability to schedule tasks, to set alerts, to create documents, right back to external systems, which is both exciting and terrifying, I think. all from your chat conversations. That's quite a shift from where we started with Genie Spaces, where it was just there answering questions. And it's now moving on to that role of sort of taking those actions. So what does that mean for a role of an analyst?
That's a great question. I mean, the Genie 1 has been sort of getting these capabilities over the last 6 months to a year, sort of slowly learning or being taught how to do these things and effectively interacting with the world more like things like Codex or Claude Code do. So there's a lot of interest there. That's the way the world has been going for a little while at this point, and this is now effectively doing that, but with the context of your data. What's going to happen to an analyst? Well, I don't think it's doomsday for the analyst role. I don't think it's we all need to go and find new jobs. I think it's just that what we expect an analyst to do changes. So for a long time, we've been talking about the shift from just reporting on what's happened to actually getting to a point where we can predict what's going to happen in the future, what we should do to try and affect that change, and trying to shift towards taking action. And I think what's actually going to happen is sort of for the analysts is that all of this stuff just doesn't just happen, right? Like ontology doesn't just know everything about your business if it's never been documented anywhere. It's learning from things that people have created, from curated things. And I think the role of the analyst is just going to shift, right? Rather than us trying to cover the entire domain, we cover the really important stuff, the definitions. It's going to become more about governance, I think, and doing a lot of this sort of stuff up front. But also, I think it's just because it can take action doesn't mean it always is going to, and it doesn't mean it's always going to take the right action either. I mean, it's getting better and it's definitely going to improve, but I think there's still going to be a place for that human in the loop. And I think an analytics person does more than just effectively feeding insights to people, or they should be doing more, but they should be understanding the business. You should be understanding and helping people understand what problems they need to solve, right? So maybe it shifts away from the taking action and more to the diagnosing sort of how we can have an impact on your organization, right? And I think I don't see it as doomsday. I think the ones that don't like that side of it, the more business side of analytics, they probably end up in the analytics engineering space, like defining the tables, a gold layer, or defining your definitions or your metrics, and so on. There's always work to be done there. And I mean, all of this kind of assumes that your data is already perfect and that we're living in this utopia where everything has already been built as a dashboard or
developed. We can dream, Ash. We can dream.
Exactly. And I mean, we've been dreaming of that since analytics was created. I mean, the whole analytics has been around for a very long time, and we've not solved all of those problems yet. And this isn't going to solve them, right? We've still got those difficult conversations to have to work out, like, how do we define things? Who's doing it in the right way? It's not just going to effectively disappear. That layer, like your semantic layer, effectively is going to become more important than ever. And the people that own the semantic layer or build the semantic layer generally are analytics people.
But it also benefits the analysts, because when a sales manager comes along and says, I need you to tell me how many sales we've done up until midday today, and you can go, well, that was on that dashboard. Well, I don't want to look at that dashboard. Just tell me the number. Then you haven't got to waste your time going to do that, have you?
Exactly. And hopefully it should enable analysts to focus on those bigger picture, bigger ticket items that we often get pulled away from to deal with this dashboard's broken or I need this number now, right? Those big scale change projects that happen across the organization where you need somebody who's more analytically minded and more logically minded to sort of break down the problem and help other people work through it. Because at the end of the day, like the answer you get from Genie One, however good the engine is, however good your data platform is, it's only as good as the question you ask, right? So, and not everybody in an organization is going to be able to get not every single person in an organization is going to be at the same level and able to get the exact same value out of Genie One without there being somebody there to guide and train them. So at minimum, even if AI and Genie One takes away all of the analytics work, we've still got the ability of partnering with the business and helping them to understand their problems and knowing what questions they should ask Genie One to help them with, for example.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, we're talking about trust, I think, in what you just said there. There's always been a sticking point with AI and BI tools. People look at a dashboard and they don't trust it for some reason because they've been burned in the past by the wrong answer. And of course, with hallucinations and Gen AI, they've been burned quite a few times, I'd have thought. So how much does getting the context and accuracy right change that conversation with your business stakeholders?
Yeah, a lot. Trust is so hard to win in this space and so easy to lose, right? So as you mentioned, it's been a problem for BI teams for decades, right? How do we make sure that the answers that we're giving back are accurate, right? Has been the challenge. And often the biggest criticism made of sort of dashboarding and things like that is that you're not getting the right answer on the dashboard. Dashboard's giving the wrong thing. And I certainly remember when I first started out having a conversation with a director who'd walked in and said the data's wrong because they'd looked at the dashboard and the data's wrong. And it's like, it's not wrong. It's
been there, done that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, every single person who's worked in data has probably experienced that at some point. And it's normally that like the context isn't right. So in that specific example, I think it was because they were expecting like it to be specific, the sales to their region and a certain constraints and across a certain time frame, or they were expecting it to be sales this month rather than the ones that get recorded onto the sales ledger, or so some things like that. Like, and that's been a challenge for ages, and that's not going away. That's actually, that problem is going to get magnified, as you were sort of alluding to with this, because there's going to be more analysis. Like Genie and these tools are going to create more analytics, more analysis of data. So making sure that we've got our definitions right and making sure that we've got that context built into the system is more important than ever. So like the Genie Ontology is only going to be as good as what is in your Databricks estate, what is in your connected apps. So if you don't have descriptions on your fields, if you don't have a metric view that has your measure like definition in there, Genie isn't going to know that. It's going to guess, because at the end of the day, these things don't want to not give you an answer. They want to give you an answer, even if that isn't right. So I think we've got to focus pretty heavily on making sure that our governance strategies are in place, right? But we've got a person who is going to take ownership for this, because the AI isn't, right? If the AI gets the question wrong and we make a bad business decision off the back of it, you can't go and sue like OpenAI or whoever it is because you made a bad decision. Like, you can't blame them. They're not going to take the accountability. Who in your organization is, and it's going to make sure that we've got the right processes in place. So your governance strategy for all of this is probably more important than it's ever been. And I think the themes of the Data and AI Summit this year for me were pretty loudly, obviously context, but also governance. And so many of the things that have been brought out in other areas and just generally were announced at the summit were around context and governance. More importantly, how do you make sure that we've got in the right context to the agents, to the system at the right time?
As all that control, that other C as they had. Sort of takes me back. Pre-summit, I was always thinking about the data and the sort of metadata you can store in Unity Catalog, and as you say, your metric views and all of those areas, and how you would have that information to help you, or help the agent, I should say, to understand where it's supposed to be looking. So effectively, you have to pretend you're somebody who doesn't know anything about the business. And then you've got to try and piece together what the question that is being asked based on all the metadata information you got there. So that's the exciting thing with ontology is it suddenly shoves in a load of business context into that viewpoint.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so the way this has worked in the past has been that a lot of that context has been in your analyst's head, right? And it's been there as as what they're learning of how your business works, of their interactions with these stakeholders that do it. And we're suddenly going to a point where actually, no, that context can't live in a person's head anymore. It needs to live in the system. And so having descriptions across your tables more important than ever, and it has been for a while already. As you sort of move into this AI era, we've been projecting that this is going to be important, but now we know it is, because it's going to be scraped into ontology, and that's going to power your Genie One. So I guess that 84.5% first time accuracy and that latency that they had in their tests of Genie with ontology, that's assuming that you've built your Databricks environment well and you've documented it well and that everything works, right? Because they're not going to test it on data that isn't on a Databricks estate that's a mess, right? So I think that's going to be the thing and the key over the next year or two is having your platform be AI ready, so that you can actually get that 84, 85, hopefully even higher in the future levels of accuracy. Because if your estate is a mess, it's probably going to be much lower, because frankly, if your estate is a mess, you've probably got that problem already with your dashboards, with whatever you're building off the top of it anyway. So this isn't going to magically solve all of the problems that you've had in that space. It's going to make them more visible. And you can be concerned and worry about that and shut down and say, no, we can't use this because it might make mistakes. But also, it's going to do things right. There's going to be value created off the back of this that you've never had before, right? That we've never been able to sort of get out of the system because it's always been stuck in there and you've not had the right people or it's not built right. And Genie's just going to work through that, right? It's going to be able to cut through it and get you an answer. Whether it's right or not, that's going to come down to how well you've documented the estate.
One of the features with Genie One that I noticed is there was a section in the Genie One interface whereby a user could upload their own skills and then be able to share that with other people. And where we were talking about all that knowledge in an analyst's head, that just sort of had a light bulb moment effectively of, is it possible, and this is hypothetical, to get that information out of an analyst's head and put enough information in a skill to be of use to other users?
That's the bet that Databricks have been having with Genie agents, which I know is a slight tangent to Genie One and Genie Ontology, but it's very difficult it's a tangent that's very difficult to ignore, because even the announcement blog for Genie One and Genie Ontology included talking about Genie agents. But the idea of that is you build out your agent based on everything you know, effectively like a Genie space, but then you can productionize that and share that and users can use it. So I think in the keynote demo, for example, they built a Genie agent that was for the person who runs Genie as the product. And so it was a Genie agent that did reporting on Genie. So it was a very meta agent as such, but effectively the person who ran that area put all of their knowledge about what it meant and what they were interested in analyzing for Genie, created an agent off the back of that, productionized it, put it into this, and then Genie One can use that as well. So Genie One can consume the agents, and if somebody asks a question that the agent is specifically answers to, it just reroutes it to that and uses that context. And I think the thing that they sort of demoed showing there was every month we want the same analysis pack to be created effectively of how Genie, how this area of the business is performing. The agent that they created was specifically just there to create that pack. So whenever you called that agent, it just creates that pack effectively for you fresh. I think that's kind of the play in the way that they're going at it, is that effectively your analysts are downloading their brain, putting it into an agent, and then the agent acts more like them.
So virtual Ash, effectively.
Well, yeah, hopefully that's, it would be great if I could have a mini me that I can just click a button and it does everything that I do, right? And I can just, I don't know, pop outside and put the laundry on or whatever. Whilst it's answering the questions for me. But realistically, even then you're going to have to check its answers, right? So that
Exactly. I
role.
was going to say, how do we make sure that virtual Ash doesn't start making things up?
I mean, good question. How do we make sure that not virtual Ash doesn't make stuff up? Right?
Actually, that is a fair question, to be honest, because
exactly. I was pitching it as a joke, but the reality is that it's no different than when we were doing analytics in the slower manual way, right? No one was making it up to be malicious most of the time. There might be some cases where people did, but like normally it's just somebody makes a mistake, right? And you've suddenly got the wrong number on your dashboard and you've made a decision off the back of that, right? And it's no different than that. So, or somebody selected the slightly wrong SQL logic, right, to answer the question. Like it was never, yeah, it's not a problem that's not existed before. It's just we're doing more analytics, so you're going to encounter it more. And the answer has always been governance, and it's always been that having that right control layer around how you process data and how you work with data. And I think that's just getting more important. It's not changing, other than that you're going to need to do it faster than ever. So obviously they announced like Genie Zero Ops for sort of data pipelines and things like that, which is another tangential place, but that's kind of trying to help you proactively work out when your data's gone stale, for example, or where a pipeline hasn't worked, which is something that could go wrong that could lead to a bad answer. I think there's going to be other things that come out around that in the future as we get into this more and more. Like we're going to have to automate some of the checking and some of the monitoring and some of the benchmarking. And it's been one of my biggest challenges with Genie spaces that have been out for a while has been that all of the checking and automate management of them has had to be done manually. You can have a benchmark and you can test the benchmarking, but if you want to go and check what new questions people were asking, it could try and learn from it. But a lot of the time there was still like a huge manual task there to go and do it. And that might be where the analyst role goes in the future, more to not sort of checking the row level data that's coming out of Genie, but effectively building the system of control, building the system of sort of automatic analysis or of the outputs and the accuracy, and making sure that people understand that. I mean, having the right data stewards in place to check your data and things like that, like all of those sort of things that we've been doing for years. I think that's where our time is going in the future, to try and make this more accurate.
We've had similar sort of conversations on the other podcasts about what the future of both analyst and data engineering roles are. So I think the common theme I'm getting from everybody is you'll have less of the boring stuff to do. So
I think that's what we're all hoping, right? I mean, we don't want to automate the fun stuff, because what's the point of that, right? But I mean,
build that into the prompt. Yeah, don't take out all my fun work, please.
Well, I mean, when AI first came around, I wrote a blog at the start of this year that actually outlined this. My initial reaction to AI was that, oh no, it's automating all of the fun stuff, all of the stuff I enjoy doing, and like a really negative reaction to AI generally. And I think slowly over time, I've come to realize that it's a net positive, right? The conversations that I'm having now are much further ahead than they've ever been in my career, right? So we're thinking about things on a much higher level, because the low level stuff is just done, right? The simple stuff is kind of just happening now. And that's been the dream for years. Like, I mean, we've talked for what analytics maturity looks like at organizations for a long time. And it doesn't sound too dissimilar to what Genie 1 and what these tools like that are enabling us to do generally. Like effectively, they're just giving us a kick to go and sort the problems that were stopping us being more mature. And if you don't do that, then you get left behind slightly. And I don't think anybody's trying to get left behind. So we go and sort governance, or we go and sort our problem with how we ingest data, or we go and put descriptions on our fields, or so on, so on, so on. And that sort of stuff is stuff that we've been telling people to do for a long time, but there's never been a consequence for not doing it, or there's never been a reason to do it effectively. Now there is. And that's brilliant in my head. It's just meaning that the problems that you now come up against would have seemed impossible to surmount a few years ago, because we hadn't done the pre-work, or we weren't doing the pre-work to enable us to get to that level of maturity to start having those problems. And that to me is only a good thing. It means that we're doing more interesting things, even if they don't seem interesting at the time because you've kind of progressed beyond. Like if I had to go back now and start writing every single SQL query to go and try and like answer every single question that I used to get when I was in my first analytics job, I think I would be bored out of my mind within weeks, like within not even a week at that level.
I like writing SQL queries. I don't know.
I mean, I was having this earlier. I was trying to write some SQL live. I was like, oh, I don't remember that syntax anymore. Like, I'd just get AI to write it. That's a scary place to be in. I mean, it wasn't simple SQL that I was writing at that point, but that's it's a scary world to think that like I'm not necessarily writing all the code all the time, but letting go a little bit. Like I now create more content and create more work. I do more analysis than I've ever done before. Right. That is a net positive in my head. And like it can be scary to let go, but I think it's letting go of the things that are like not the right things, if that makes sense. Like keeping hold of the things that are important. So that control layer, that governance layer, that kind of stuff, that's human at the moment. And obviously AI is going to sort of sit over the top of that and use that to go and inform Genie One with things like ontology. But I think that's a good thing.
It's exciting times. It's just trying to keep up the change sometimes, I think.
I mean, that's yeah.
So you were on the ground in San Francisco during the summit.
Yes.
What was the reaction to Genie One and Genie Ontology from the people you spoke to?
Yeah, largely excitement. I think the challenge that we've sort of seen as advancing for a little while, like most of this year, we've been thinking about how do we get the context into the engines and the AI systems that we built, right? So we were looking at our own version of an ontological knowledge graph and things like that. And we've been thinking about these problems for a while. And I think that they resonated, certainly with our clients, certainly with the people that I was talking to. This is a challenge that people face, right? The AI is only as good as the amount of information it knows about your business, right? And ontology is going to effectively give Genie One a crash course on your business and make it more accurate, more reliable, smarter. It's an improvement on it's like going out and hiring a better analyst, right? And that's effectively what it is. And sorry, not a better analyst than a human analyst. Genie is now going to be a better analyst than old Genie was. And I think that's exciting. And I think there was a lot of excitement around the Genie stuff. Ontology was probably the word of the conference. And to be honest, it's the word of the tech sector at the moment. There's ontology springing up in every product, like there was agents last year or RAG a couple of years ago, right? It's the hot buzzword at the moment, and everybody's got slightly different meanings for it. But yeah, it's excitement, or exciting, sorry, is what I think. And there was definitely a buzz about the conference after that first keynote where they sort of demoed a bunch of this stuff.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Ash. Thanks for speaking to me, and thanks for speaking to us, I should say. Hopefully see you again on the Data Hot Seat soon.
Yeah, I'd love to be back. See you soon, hopefully.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Data Hot Seat. Thank you to Ash for breaking down Genie One and Genie Ontology so well. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the headline feature here isn't really Genie One itself, it's the trust that Genie Ontology is trying to build underneath it. Because an AI coworker that can take action is only genuinely useful if you can actually trust what it's telling you in the first place. If you've had bumpy experiences with self-service BI tools in the past, this might be the moment to take another look. But as always, go in with your eyes open and test it against your own data before you bet the farm on it. If today's episode was useful, share it with someone in your business who's been crying out for better self-service analytics. And if you want to catch up on the rest of the series, Omnigent, Lakehouse RT, Genie Zero Ops, you know where to find us. From all of us here at Advancing Analytics, until next time. The Data Hot Seat.